Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Good evening, everyone, depending on where you are. And Brad, which day you're on. Thanks for getting there here so early there, Brad. Appreciate it. I know it's an extra effort. I don't know that I'd wake up at 5 or 6 for someone else's stream, but you do it fairly consistently, and I do appreciate it. We're going to be doing something a little bit different today. I'm gonna wait a little bit to get started on that. We'll wait for some other people to join us, assuming others do. We're going to be putting a spotlight on some mostly smaller channels, 3 smaller channels and one that's just technically smaller than mine, but really niche and really great. And I think a lot of you guys would like to know about it. This is not to overlook Brad and Brad's Guitar Garage, but I've mentioned him and his channel quite a bit. I figure if you watch these streams, you know Brad, you know his channel. Here's some other things I want to point you guys to. We're going to get to that in a little bit. So, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, etc. Andrew Waltz, thank you very much. He says, "Hey, Lyle, do you think the brass, not grass, grounding plate vintage Fenders use is the best option for a new build, thinking for a 5E3? No. It was very useful to them because they could solder to it very easily before putting it into the amplifier. So the grounds were made to the brass plate, and then it was screwed to the chassis because it's very close quarters in a 5E3. If you have a brass grounding plate that happens to fit, feel free to use it, but it's not necessary. You can either solder directly to a steel chassis, or you can do what we do on more modern amps with aluminum chassis, and you can just put in little ground lugs screwed into the chassis. There you go. Everything's great. The brass is fine, and it made assembly faster at Fender, but not a lot faster. If you're just doing 1 amp, no big deal to skip it. They were doing 100 amps a day, hopefully. 4 a.m. Jesus. Thanks, Volume 8. Appreciate that. Hey, love to rock. Hey, Travis. Natas Satana says, "Hey, Lyle, thanks for the awesome hi, Lyle. Reading is fundamental. Thanks for the awesome content. Thank you. The vibrato on my 75 Super Reverb comes on by itself at times. Any idea why? Thanks again. The only thing that causes that to go on or turn off is whether the tip of the RCA plug and the wire attached to it is connected to ground or not. So if it's randomly connecting and you don't have the foot switch connected, you have possible leakage through the RCA plug, RCA jack. You could have tarnishing, you could have corrosion, or you could have someplace where the wire is just really thin or has very little insulative properties where it's resting against chassis. If this is happening when it's connected to the foot switch, you probably have a stray bit of strand of wire either in the RCA plug or in the foot switch, which is sometimes moving and touching when it should not, and in which case it's grounded out, and here comes the vibrato. Hey, Gringo Pig. On most Fenders with vibratos, you engaged the vibrato by applying ground to the tip of the RCA jack. On Princeton's and I believe on Vibro Champs, it's the opposite. The vibrato is on until that is grounded out. Hello, Gringo Pig. How's everyone doing today? Hey, SVT 4001. Ferd Burfel. I did it again. I can't make out your name on the damn thing here. I'm going to get this thing. It is Burfel, not Burfy. Okay, good. Just making sure. Hello, Ferd. Good to see you here again. Dr. Russ, hello. What was the model of the Bassman ratio you said was a good remake? The 59 LTD. That is the only Bassman remake as far as I know. But the limited, they called it the LTD, like it's limited edition, but they made thousands of them. The 59 ratio LTD is fantastic. What's interesting about it is that there is the published schematic out there in the world for the 58, 59, 60 Bassman, but the amps that were actually produced by Fender do not match the 58 schematic. The LTD has some very different things in it compared to the published schematic for that model, the 5F6A. But it is what was actually most of the amps that left actually went out in production matched what's actually in the 59 LTD. The only amps which really closely copy the printed schematic values of the 5F6A are the early JTM 45s, where they seemingly either got a very early example of a basement or they got that schematic and just did that. But most of the 5F6As do not match the published schematic, and that's what they reproduced in the LTD. Hey, Jimmy Joe Fine. Yeah, it's been really hot, really crazy hot. Today it's nice. It's been raining. It's in the 80s, I guess. Very humid though. Hey, Agadicio. Thank you very much. Ermagerd, Ferd Burfel. I did it again. I don't know why. I need to see if I can change the font on this thing. I don't think I can. But yeah, it just wants it to be Burfy to my eyes. Hey, Joachim Jonker, I have no opinion on Goodman Audium speakers. I understand there's some good ones out there, Goodmans, but many of them that I've had come in have been of the same quality where the vice principal would say, well, Mrs. Watson, please come to the office. So, but that's from a relatively small sample size. It's good to see everybody here. Dan of New Jersey says, why is a Hot Rod Deluxe effects loop so noisy? It's not. The effects loop in the Hot Rod Deluxe is quiet. The problem you're having is that the low voltage supply, which feeds power to the Hot Rod Deluxe's effects loop, is really a piece of crap, and that's not going to affect that. It's going to affect reverb. It's going to affect channel switching. See all my videos on the channel about fixing the low voltage supply in Hot Rod Deluxes, and that also applies to a lesser degree to the Blues Deluxes and Blues DeVilles. But all the Hot Rods, especially, they just nuke their own low voltage supply, and then the op amps in the effects loop don't operate correctly. They've had that same stupid circuit out for 30 years. It was a cost-cutting measure, just borrowing that existing thing from the evil twins so they didn't have to do any R&D, and they rushed the Hot Rod out to market. And so they've got literally tens, hundreds of thousands of those things out there that have burned themselves up over the decades, and they have never updated that fundamental stupid thing. And it's so easy to generate a plus minus 15 or plus minus 16 voltage supply that generates no heat, that does not damage anything. They don't care. People keep buying them. You have Mark 1, version 1, version 2, version 3, 4, whatever. Oh, it's all cosmetic on the outside. The guts pretty much are the same. Hey, Brian Pierce. Before we get too much farther, I'd like to ask everyone who's currently in the chat a favor. I want to move on to a little intro section before we get going. So I don't want too many questions to pile up. So I want to answer Brian Pierce's question and then move on to at least one of the 4 channels I want to put a spotlight on. I'm not going to do them all back to back. We'll pepper them through, make this last, but I want to work all this in and still answer questions. So if you could hold off on some questions from this point forward for a little bit, that'd be great. Brian Pierce says, hey, Lyle, AC30 Custom Classic question again. I know not to use a standby switch, but can't say the same for everybody else that uses my gear. Best way to modify the circuit so the standby switch is usable. Yeah, all the standby switch is doing is connecting the HT center tap fuse to chassis ground. So you can either take the 2 wires that are going to the standby switch, pull them off the standby switch, solder them together and wrap it in tape, and then it's always in play and it doesn't matter what the standby switch does. Or you can run a new wire from the fuse holder location straight to chassis. Or you can you could even bypass. You can just put a jumper on the switch they use, the standby switch, so that it's always on no matter what the physical position is. But it's hard because they have quick connects, and then you're soldering with quick connects. But that's all it's doing. All right, let me start with one of the first channels I want to feature. I've got 4 channels, and like I said, 3 of them are unknowably. I don't know why they're still small channels. They have great content, all of them. One of them is only slightly smaller than mine, but I just want to make sure people know about it because I think it's fantastic. I have the privilege of having almost 40,000 subscribers now. And as Spider-Man says, I feel that I need to help people who have, as people have helped me. So I have no particular order for these. This is not a ranking. I'm going to start with one that I think is just an awful lot of fun. And this is a guy who just sits in his room, phones it, does it all on his, I think it's on his iPhone. And he plays what interests him. And he talks about what interests him. And what I really like about his channel, besides him, because he's got a funny personality, is that he is a really good guitarist, but he is not a great guitarist yet. And I think he would agree with that. So you watch a Robin Ford video, and he's like, "Oh, you just do this," and you're like, "What happened?" You don't know how to get from where you are to where Robin Ford's at. This guy is a little bit closer, pretty close to Robin Ford, or he's on the path, but he connects the dots for you, and you can follow along. And some of you guys may be better than him. A lot of you guys aren't. I'm not, but I love learning from his channel, and I really enjoy the way he plays. I like his musicality, and I just want to share that with you guys. And I like that he has very self-effacing humor. And if the 10th Doctor ever needs a stand-in, Paul Stafford Cook will do it. A nice job.
I apologise if that opening stuff was just a bit too weird for some of you in terms of where I was going kind of sonically and with scales and chords and so on. But it's interesting. I find that dreamy sound of the whole tone scale or augmented chords, I find it all very interesting. And I'm just, as I say, I'm trying to get better, so that means pushing myself into weird places. Heavy position. Go. Right, so that's the basis of what we're doing. How the hell do you get that into your playing though? Instead of doing this,
I don't know why it cut off there. It's supposed to have played a little bit longer than that. I'm not sure what's going on with that. But that gives you a sense of his channel. I mean, he really plays really nice bits, and he explains it well. One of the things that's interesting to me is that he doesn't really know theory. I know theory. He plays better than I do, but I know theory. But he's hearing things which theory agrees with. He has a different explanation for it, or he'll just say, "I don't know why it works, but it works." And theory is not prescriptive. Musical theory is descriptive. You are saying this is what something is and why it sounds good and why it works. You're not saying theory says you must do this. Theory will explain to you why, hey, if you try all these things, you'll know why different things work or don't. But they're not going to say you must use Phrygian, or you must use Dorian, or you must use Aeolian or harmonic minor, or blah, blah, blah. No, you have more freedom when you have the theory, because you understand how you can break what people think are rules that aren't rules, they're just old habits. Anyway, Paul really gets in there, and he's got great ears, and he's a really fun guy to watch. I hope you guys enjoy his channel as much as I do. And I hope for you, for my sake, Paul, if you watch this just once in one of your videos, throw in an allons-y. Thank you. All right, let's get back to the questions for a little bit. Then we'll get to some of the other channels I want to spotlight. Mark Carter says, greetings from the UK. Hey, Mark. Hey, Dustin. Travis McCartney says, I just recapped my Vox AC15C1 yesterday. The transformer date code was from 2010. One of the filter caps was leaking. Is there a good way to get the schmooze from the pads? Yeah, isopropyl alcohol and a very soft old toothbrush does a pretty good job of almost everything you're going to encounter in that kind of thing. Be sure that it was actual electrolytic schmooze, because there's a little bit of a glue that they use to hold those caps on, and it, it looks a lot like a leaky cap residue, but it's not difficult. Don't use a razor blade. You don't want to damage the conformal coating on the board. Just get in there with a soft bristle toothbrush, some isopropyl. If that doesn't budge it, try some naphtha or lighter fluid. Hey, Hit Metal Works. RRD, I do not know anyone in Missouri who does good work. I'm sure there are. I'm not too far from Missouri. If you're, if your brother's up for a drive, I love SVTs. But I'm not shilling for myself, but I don't know someone to recommend in Missouri. Missouri. Hey, Clyde, he says, hey, Lyle, could you tell us some of your fave bass amps and fave bang for the buck? I have a lot of good guitar amps. Should I just tinker with those? It depends on your needs. Are you going to be gigging? Are you going to be just recording or just playing for yourself? If you're not gigging and you just want to record or play for yourself, one of the best bass amps in the world is a Fender Bassman or a Fender Twin or a Fender Super Reverb or a Fender Pro Reverb. Any of those will sound great for a bass. If you were to go back and get a very expensive Olympic FX1 bass preamp, it's a Fender Twin non-reverb channel circuit. That's all it is. They increased the cathode bypass caps from 25 microfarad to 150 microfarad, which was pointless. 25 microfarad and a 1.5K is already flat down to like 7 hertz. So it was a pointless increase that they did. The difference between the output section of a Twin and a bass amp are the speakers and the maximum amount of wattage. So if you're just recording, turn the bright switch off, go for it. Twin Reverb is a phenomenal bass amp, especially since you typically going to combine it with a DI. So you get the speaker for the air and the DI for the fundamental, and you're good to go. If you're playing live, it's not a world that I keep up with, because guitarists have locked onto tube amps. Bassists, for the most part, have gone in other directions. I've been impressed by some of the Aguilar Class D stuff. I've always been a big fan, and in the past for my own bass rig, what I used was a Sansamp RBI or PSA1. I don't remember which one I had. One of the rack mount Sansamp preamps. And then I was running into a, not QVC, that's the shopping, QSC, a QSC Class AB old heavy transistor-based power amp. I had 3,000 watts in Domano if I needed it to. And I had, I think I had a 2x12 and a 4x10 bass cab back when I had a bass rig. I used to have a lot more gear than I have now. Thanks for reminding me. But I would ask professional bassists what they would recommend. And if they say the Fender bass thing, whatever it's called, the Rumble, don't follow that advice. And don't buy Eden, and don't buy SWR, and don't buy, what's the other one that's just so... Oh, the Mark bass. Brad will weigh in more on that. Let's see here. Hey, Dennis Flock. He says, got myself a Sir Ombre after your excellent video. Congratulations. Only change I made was to make a Celestion Gold instead of the V-Type. My favorite amp now. Yeah, the Celestion Gold is, I think, a better choice for that circuit than the V-Type. I don't quite get the V-Type choice, but I mean, it sounds good. The Ombre with the stock V-Type sounds quite good. I just think that amp is more alive through a fair good number of other speakers, but they tend to, the V-Type's not a cheap speaker. Hey, Jimmy John says, howdy. How do, Jimmy? I'm debating between picking up either a Fender Champ reissue or the Pro Junior. Any advice? Yeah, buy almost anything else. Almost anything else. The Pro Junior is garbage, and the Champ reissue is not great, and it's got a DSP circuit in there. When it dies, you're going to be SOL. Because they're not going to be making that for more than a couple of years. They're going to change the DSP card, and the old one won't be available, and then you won't have reverb. There are so many better amps. Over a Fender Champ reissue or the Pro Junior, I would go out right now, this minute, and buy a Boss Katana 50. And you can have the same small output level as the other two, or you can have enough that you can actually gig with. You can go into your computer, you can plug into headphones, you can play along with tracks. It's a much more flexible, better sounding amplifier and costs less. It'll be it's not an expensive thing. It does what it does. Expect it to be what it is, but it's much better than those two, which are pretending to be much better amps based on Fender's heritage. Fender is trading on the history of that logo. Bo says it's storming like crazy in Tupelo. Yeah, we've had some storms passing through. We've got pretty constant rain outside right now. Hey, Scott. Love the Celestian Cream. The Cream, I think that's the Alnico 90. That's phenomenal. The Eminence Eric Johnson is also phenomenal if you're interested in a great big high wattage Alnico sound. The Creamback 65 and 75 are also great choices. Hey, Strat fans, Strat fans TL. Any good amp design theory books to recommend in addition to the set from Richard Kuhnel? Brad's working on a list that I will be sharing. And if you look at his last live stream, he touched on that. We're going to be talking to each other and come up with like one video of recommendations. So, because we both get asked that all the time. And, every time you get asked that, you go through the usual suspects. You're like, did I forget one? Or am I recommending something that's way too much for this person? It's going to scare them off. So we're going to get together and come up with a really great list. That said, I also attempted to answer this question in many previous live streams. So look at the ones 2 and 3 live streams ago. I know I covered it there. Thank you very much, Daniel C. I appreciate that. Even if I did call a 72 Deluxe late 70s yesterday in that Fender Tricks video. The amp's down there. You can see it beneath my bench. I wasn't working on that amp. I was just going to use it to show the tube thing because I thought people would like to know how that works because it's kind of some of the stuff old guys know and it's kind of a law of science. Not everyone has an old salt like me to show them how these stupid amp tricks work. So I wasn't really paying attention to the amp. I remembered it was a 70 something because I'd worked on it several years ago, and I just took a peek at the reverb transformer and I misread the date because it was in shadow. It's a 72, not a 76 or 77. Yeah, I'm not highlighting Brad's channel today because I've highlighted Brad's channel all the time. I figure most of the guys who are regulars here in the live chat know about Brad. I'll be featuring him again. Let's see. Hey, Rob F. Hope you enjoy when you get a chance to watch it. Yeah. Hey, Joe Blogs, are you a Scotsman? Yeah. I love watching. I love watching Paul. In addition to loving the sound of his voice. I grew up with Doctor Who and the BBC, so it's home turf for me. Very familiar, very comforting. Never sounded like the guys who were going to beat me up in the parking lot of the Safeway here. His musical taste is great, and I love watching him explain his path. I wish I had more time to put into practice the stuff that he talks about. Back when I was majoring in music theory and writing and performing all the time, I was a much better player and I could hear changes and, my ear training was up and, it's not like riding a bicycle. That stuff definitely gets rusty and I've got the beginnings of, I think, arthritis. So Excuses, right? A theory is extremely useful for most people, but it, like I said, Scott, it is descriptive, not prescriptive. It's never going to be if you really understand theory and you're using it correctly, it is never a limiting factor. Eddie Van Halen probably didn't have the vocabulary to describe what he was doing, but he knew what he was doing, including when he just bullshit his way through some stuff, just playing a pattern, a finger pattern that where none of the notes matter, but it's okay because 180 beats per minute. Alex2112 says, I have an opportunity to buy a JMP1 preamp for $600. Do I think that's a good deal or no? I do not know because I'm not sure about availability of parts for the MIDI stuff should the MIDI stuff go south. I would ask Dave Friedman, send him an email about that because in Memphis we don't have a lot of the rack gear. People just don't tend to use it, or those who did get into the rack gear have sold it. I haven't seen anything other than a couple simulclass Mesa things or old PV Classic 2020s in a while. So I would ask someone in LA who's still going to be seeing more of that rack gear. So I don't know whether that's a good buy or not. Can't pretend to know everything. Alejandro Guitares. Hello, I want to ask your opinion on an Engel Fireball. I'm looking for a 6L6 amp, and the PV6505 is the other option. I'm not sure whether either is a great choice. I'm not that familiar with the Engels. We don't have a lot of them here. I've read some things from other techs to make me think that they're not fantastic choices. And I know that the 6505 is not really a great amp, but it does an awful lot for a relatively small amount of money. If you saw that in the Amps Under $1,000 video, that is a valid choice still for higher gain stuff. It does an awful lot for not too much. You can get some good sounds for certain genres. Reliabilities, the 6505 and 5150 are not very reliable amps long term, but some guys never have problems, and you probably get 5 to 10 years out of it. So I would keep looking at the market, but I would need to know your price range. I can't just say, oh, just go get a B100. You'll be fine. Without knowing your price range. Brad, you got the man flu. Sorry, man. I was wondering why we didn't get the nasty drink yesterday or today. We need to have a more Brad with nasty drinks. William Mason, what is the difference running your tubes hot versus cold? That's a really long, deep subject. I'm trying to decide. I could talk about bias for the next hour before we get to the point where you'd really understand my recommendations. So I'm not going to do that here. I've touched on it in an awful lot of videos. In general, you want to run, say between 50 and 65% idle dissipation in a fixed bias amp, in a fixed bias Class AB amp. If you have control over your wall voltage, you can go over 60, you can go up to 70%. But most people don't have control of their wall voltage. Most people don't even know what their wall voltage is. In Memphis right now, it's 112. It's 112 here in Memphis right now. So if I had I do have. If I were to be playing through that deluxe reverb right now, where I know I set the bias at 53% idle dissipation with 120 volts coming out of the wall, I would still be in a good, if cool, bias range with 112 volts coming out. And then 2 days from now, when the wall voltage is 127 in Memphis, I'd still be in a safe bias range, albeit warmer. If I were taking that to a studio and I wanted to dial in a specific sound, and I knew the studio had a regulated power, and I had a Variac, and I would never exceed 117 volts mains, or 114 volts, whatever, I could set the bias exactly where it ought to be. And people on the forums talk about bias as if, hey, this number is the goal. Well, that number is only meaningful if it's what it's biased at with the wall voltage is here. And if that wall voltage is always changing and you don't even know it, that means that this is always changing. And is it changing into a safe range? Or is it going outside of a safe range? So, in general, aside from following factory recommendations, don't go lower than 40 unless you're going for a real specific cold clipping kind of high gain metal thing. And don't go over 65 or 63 unless you have control over your voltages. Your tubes will last a lot longer. At that point, your timing as a player, at any point, unless the amp's on fire or doesn't make sound, your timing as a player matters a lot more than your bias. Thanks, Blues R Us. He says he has a brown face reverb tank, but lately I have to crank the mix knob to get it to sound right. What do I think is the problem? That could be most likely is a weak tube, like Peladicio said. I would expect it probably to be the tube, and specifically, if it's not the recovery tube, all the brown face reverb tanks, especially if it's one of the reissues, especially the ones which use an EL84 for the reverb driver tube, those things, that's a circuit's just hell on EL84s. It's tough on 6v6s too. So that sound that tube is problematic. The easiest way to tell is tap on the tube. If you hear a loud thunder, then your recovery tube's okay. If the thunder is still quiet, you have a bad recovery tube. If you have loud thunder but quiet reverb, it's probably the driver tube that's losing the juice. So that's a quick and dirty way to guesstimate. Nola rocks. If your concert has a tube or solid state rectifier, if it has a tube rectifier, you will see a rectifier tube present. If it doesn't, you won't. So a concert will have two 6L6 power tubes. If you have two large bottle tubes and that's it, you've got a solid state rectifier. If you have two large bottle tubes and then a third large bottle tube, that's a rectifier tube. You should use the standby if it has solid state. You don't need to use the standby if it has rectifier. Hey, Brad's got very good gigging bassist advice, which aligns with mine. He's got a PSA 1, a DBX 160A, and then a 500 watt with a PA amp, which is basically, I had a louder version of that with the old QSC. I think I had the PSA 1, and the QSC was like 4 rack spaces and 25 pounds, and it was awesome. Might have been a little bit more than that. I was younger and stronger then. I didn't use the DBX 160A. I had a compressor pedal, but the DBX 160A is a much better version. Oh, I never liked the speakers and heartkeys. Hey, Bo. Yeah, Hot Rod Deluxes and 65 Deluxe Reverbs are totally different amps. The Hot Rod visually looks like it should be old, but it has no reference to any historic model of Fender ever. And people will tell you that, oh, this sounds like a Bassman, or this sounds like... No, it looks like a Bassman. And the one with 4x10 sounds a little bit closer to Bassman just because it's 4x10s. None of the Hot Rods, none of the Blueses are actual historic Fender circuits, and they don't sound like it. The 65 Deluxe Reverb is a true classic. Hey, thanks, JV's Hangout. My website is just ancient history stuff. I need to get in there and revamp the entire thing. I just haven't had time. Yeah, I'm in Memphis. But don't hold it against me. Daniel C. Here's a question. I'm not shitting on you, Daniel. He says, what's the warmest tube amp you've heard? I've got high gain amps, solid state amps, and modelers, but lacking a nice warm tube amp. I do not own any Fender amps. I don't know whether I would describe, technically any tube amp as a warm tube amp because they get hot. But I get so tired of audio terms. Warm. What does warm mean? Warm compared to what? I've gone through hell making some choices on some studio monitors and microphones for my setup here. You see my bench mic here. It's an overhead small diaphragm condenser, and I've got some nice studio monitors and a whole bunch of stuff that behind the scenes stuff that doesn't really matter other than that it helps me give better content. And to find informed decisions on these things, I had to wade through so much audiophile bullshit. I mean, headphones, the descriptions people gave to these headphones, the difference in sound between these headphones, which are biodynamic DT 770s, and these Sony MDR 7506s. Both of these are industry standards, but people would write poetry about the differences. These sound more accurate and they have better imaging. Those sound brighter and less good imaging, but you can really hear mistakes in high frequency stuff, and you can really hear details in the mids in these. And these are more comfortable for long-term use, at least for my giant ears. But, these are handy because they emphasize things that I don't want emphasized most of the time. But speaking of audiophile bullshit and wading through it, that's a great segue to bring me to the second channel I want to put a spotlight on. Now, when I'm looking for things like microphones and monitors, where I used to know the game really well, but, the market has changed in the last 20 years. And more things are going digital. So a lot of my analog knowledge, it still applies, but you have to get there a different way with digital stuff. So I'm relearning some stuff. So when I find people, giving advice on such things, I look to see if they have given reviews or advice about things that I do know really well. And then I can kind of get a sense of whether I think they're right. And if they're right about that, then they're more likely to be right about other things. And it's not as egocentric a litmus test as you might think. Given what I do, the stuff I know really well. And so when my in-depth knowledge of one subject aligns with the experience of another reviewer, and then they have similar experience with things that are outside my expertise, I'm more inclined to give them some credence and heed their advice. And that led me to this guy. And as far as I can tell, he has professionally been a boom mic operator on film sets, which is a totally different world than the ones we operate in. He's also a musician, a guitarist, a singer. He's really funny. He really knows his shit. And he's got a great sense of humor. And he has like under 3,000 subscribers, which blows my mind. His production quality is stellar. His information is fantastic. And he has even better tape measures than I do. Ladies and gentlemen, I bring to you the Time Preservation Society.
This is a channel trailer. It's a channel trailer about the audio review videos that one man produces in his bunker. The channel is called the Time Preservation Society. Because why not name a channel with a long, weird name that doesn't seem to have anything to do with audio recording? So it appears to be an exciting and entertaining channel, but that couldn't be further from the truth. It's an audio review channel hosted by just some guy. The Zoom H1N is a switch and a present boost switch. It's got the exact same metal here as the SM58.
Let's briefly touch on the elephant in the room.
The Time Preservation Society. Not an actual society.
And transmission.
And transmission. And transmission. Yippee-ki-yay, mother...
All right, so that's the Time Preservation Society. His handle in comments, various places, is The Recordist. And I really enjoy his videos. They're primarily on microphones and mic pre's and stuff like that. But there's always overlap with general guitar world. And for what I do with recording stuff, extreme overlap. And I'm glad to have found him as a resource. I don't know any of these guys personally. A couple of them I've exchanged little chats with, but that's the extent of it. Oh my gosh, the coffee fairy is coming. Hello, love. Thank you very much.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Bye, everybody.
Everyone say hello to Nikki. So anyway, I just find his channel really refreshing and wonderful. And not everyone here is going to care. But for those of you who are into that world or want to be, I cannot stress how great it is. His information is really good. And his presentation, even if you don't care about microphones, watch his videos. He's fucking hilarious. And I expect he's going to have a lot more subscribers soon. You guys go out there and make that happen. We can all take credit for it together. More on the concept of recording later when we get to one of our next spotlight channels. But let's go ahead and get back to some questions first. Oh, yeah, Jimmy Joe Fine. The TC bass amps today are terrible. I've got one over there that's unfixable because it's got a multi-layer PCB, and the layer that's defective is in the middle layer. So screw you guys. JV sold his 65 champ. Man, yeah. Hey, Paladicio, I'm sorry you had to go, but yeah, I love Paul's playing. He just a really, I mean, I don't need to tell you guys about Rick Beato. I don't need to tell you guys about Paul Davids. I don't need to tell you guys about Chris Buck. But I think Paul Stafford Cook kind of touches that same thing that Chris Buck gets, where just like, that was just lovely. I would not have thought to do that. It's not even a matter of it being a technically difficult thing to do. It's just oh, wow, look what you do if you just incorporate these intervals. I guess that's probably one of the highest compliments I could pay Paul, is that, he keeps me, he's always surprising. Yeah, SVT 4001, the Rumble, it sounds okay as long as it works. The trouble is when it stops working, which it will. They are built of like tissue paper. If one drops over and the power cord's plugged in, that power cord IC jack, which is plastic, will puncture and put a deep depression and tear the rear metal panel because it's an Australian word, hair thick. And I scrolled down too fast. Jeff Mizai, I have no experience with a Soldano 30 watt. I have experience with the old SLOs, 50 watt and 100 watt. They're fantastic. And Friedman's are great. Hey, Frank C. I buy tubes primarily at the Tube Store, Tube Depot, and CE Distribution. Magic tubes and Euro tubes are also good choices. Never buy tubes from Musician's Friend. Never buy tubes from Sweetwater. Never buy them from Guitar Center. Go to a tube vendor, someone who sorts, tests, and stands behind their product and can answer your questions and actually know what they're talking about, as opposed to, yeah, man, we got these Mesas, man, they rock. RJ Electric, hey Lyle, how do I know if an amp has a good quality effects loop? Well, if you're in the room with it, turn it on and see if you hear a difference. A good, really high quality effects loop is invisible. Tube buffered, not necessary. It's possible to do. It's just rarely done right. Series parallel, you almost never want parallel. Parallel introduces a whole other bag of wax. You want a good series buffered low impedance loop. Typically that can be done these days best with a MOSFET, or is often best done with a MOSFET. It can be done with the tubes, but MOSFETs are cheaper, less problematic, less thermal noise, quieter. You can find that in an AC30 custom or Custom Classic is a good example. Though on the Custom Classic it's op amp, and on the custom it's a MOSFET. If you want parallel stuff, you run a series loop into a mixer and with aux sends and then bring it back. So you do all the parallel stuff outside the amp. I've got somewhere over there still a Mackie 1404 mixer. I haven't used it in years, but you can get those for $100-$150 probably these days. That has infinitely better routing than anything you're going to find inside any amp. You can do all kinds of series parallel wonderful things with that if you need to. Deluxe 3. If you replace the first filter cap, yeah, change all the filter caps, reflow all the solder joints on the pots and jacks, flat earth. Ghost notes and buzzies and vibrations. You said Deluxe 3. Is that a Deluxe Blues Deluxe 3? I'd have to know exactly what model, what you mean. Alex 2112, what do you think of Seriatone amps? I think they're good for the money. I think they have some odd choices as where they save money versus where they don't. I've answered that in a couple other stuff, and I've got some videos up on Seriatones. I've got a Seritone Marshall review and then a comparison of that amp to a different, to an actual Marshall, I believe. Check it out and see what you think. David S. Thoughts on the new PRS Tele, NF33. Well, whenever every guitar channel reviews the same guitar on the same day, it rubs me the wrong way. So when everyone gets the same PRS Tele on the same day, when everyone gets the new HRDX20 on the amp on the same day, when everyone gets the Fender Acoustasonic on the same day, it's really hard to take any of the positive reviews seriously, because obviously every influencer was sent the same damn product. Probably not sent it on the same day, and probably a lot of them are reviewing the same guitar that was sent from this guy to this guy to this guy, and there's an embargo on when they can release the videos, and all the videos come out on the same day. But it's a big coordinated campaign, obviously, which means that they probably did not buy that brand new unavailable guitar. So a lot of those opinions, I will wait and see what people think about that guitar after buying it with their own money and using it for 6 months, or people who buy it and review it with a clear eye with a lot of experience and no connection to Paul Reed Smith. Now, I've met Paul Reed Smith. I've hung out with Paul Reed Smith briefly. He's a nice guy. I'm not criticizing the man. I'm just pointing out the reality of the industry today, that coordinated review campaigns like that I take with a huge grain of salt. I don't think it's a particularly attractive looking guitar, but then again, you don't have to like my guitars. So, all right, Drew Summers, says Jim at Stonehound Sound in Lee Summit, Missouri, has done good work for me in the past. So there's a tech recommendation in Missouri for you. And so Jim, if you see this, there you go. I need a lightweight 1x12 cab to run my Bandmaster, Andy Hightide says. Would a pine cab and a higher power Neo speaker be bad? No, not at all. Get the Neo Creamback. That thing sounds really good for a Neo speaker for Fenders. I had one in with that Pro Reverb reissue a month or so back. I was really, really impressed with the sound of that speaker. It's a little bit bright, but then it was brand new. I like to hear it again after 3-4 months. But yeah, get yourself a nice lightweight pine cab and stick a Neo speaker in it and go to town quickly. Hey, Tony Flamingo, sorry, I keep doing that to you, man. I'm sorry. I have really bad astigmatism, so I can see stuff that's right here, and I can see stuff that's about 6 feet away, and I've got the monitor. What's the best way to explain this? To get this view with this camera lens, I have to be this far from the camera, which means the camera has to be there. And I want to look at the camera, even though I forget half the time, and then just look slightly to the left to see the questions, which means that they're right on the edge of where I can see. And so Flamingo, however I'm supposed to pronounce your name, I apologize, turns into Flamingo at first glance. A dangerous speed reading, by the way. He says, I have an all original 65 Deluxe reverb, all good, but the reverb is just too much, even at 2 on the knob. Any suggestions to calming the reverb down a little? Yeah. There are 2 basic ways you can do that. Number 1, you can, 3 ways. 3, sir. The most intrusive way, change the linear taper pot for an audio taper pot. And that will make 2 much, much lower than it is now. And you'll have a much greater control over the fine range in that amp. whether you change the pots in a 65 Deluxe Reverb is between you and your amp maker. I find it very worthwhile, and you can always, it's just like 3 wires. You can always take out the original pot, put it in a safe place. Remember where that safe place is. Put in a 250K audio taper pot, and then, where's the 100K on that? Anyway, put in an audio taper pot, and then if you need to sell it, put the original linear back. Number 2 is you can experiment with different 12AX7s or even a 5751 for V4, which is the reverb recovery stage. You could find tubes, if you have a vendor that really measures things, you could find one where the correct triode necessary, which would be triode A in that tube, would be a lower gain than triode B. So triode B, you want closer to nominal 100. Triode A, you might want something closer to 70 or 80, and that'll turn down your reverb recovery without turning down the mixer. Or option C, you can try a 12AU7 reverb driver tube instead of a 12AX. You will have less strong reverb, but it might, the 12AU may not last as long. Do I have recommendations for a modern high gain amp? See, Ruben, the issue with the modern high gain amp and recommendations is I don't know your price range and I don't know your musical style. I mean, because the guys in Slipknot and Steve Lukather both use modern high gain amps. They use very different high gain amps with very different sounds. So, sorry about the occasional sibilant. I'm hoping that OBS comes out with an update that lets me run VST version 3 so I can use my de-essers and shit. I've got this tooth thing I've alluded to, and occasionally it whistles. I never used to whistle, but sibilants, you know, particularly when I first had that first crappy lav mic, it was a party. Let's see. I have seen a Mesa, California tweed, but I still didn't believe it. Flame topology, 68 Deluxe Reverb issue or 68 Pro Reverb issue. As you worked on both, which is a better rig? Neither, as they come from the factory. The 65 reissue Deluxe Reverb is so much better than the 68, which is not a reissue of anything Fender ever made. The 65 sounds better, it's quieter. The 68 is just noisy for no good reason. The 68 Pro Reverb is a good amp. It's not. It sits in an odd space. But here's the thing. It really comes down to if that's the best thing you can afford. Because for the price, you get a good amount. I think it is a compromised choice. I think the 68 Pro Reverb reissue is kind of a compromised choice the same way the Marshall DSL-40 CR is a compromised choice. Is it really the best of what it's supposed to be? No. But is it $900 and about 35, 40 watts in a 1x12 that fits in the trunk of my car for a gig? Yes. So I think the 65 reissue Deluxe is the better sounding amp. The Pro Reverb is the louder amp. The excellent sounding 65 reissue Super Reverb and Twin Reverb are much larger, heavier, more expensive amps. So, is the brown box a good investment? It can be. It's lighter, but less accurate than using a Variac. For some people, you can just use a computer uninterruptible power supply that has a preset voltage drop. It costs less than either. If you're always good saying, all right, it's just going to give me 110. But brown boxes are a bit overhyped, but there's nothing wrong with them. Alex, I can't tell you where you can get a 4-hole tube amp for cheap. If I could tell you, I wouldn't. I'd be buying them myself. Craig Flowers Music. Am I one of the channels you need to know? That's one of those tough questions. You know, the other day I was buying something and I had to prove that I am not a robot. And it was identify all the pictures with motorcycles. And one of the pictures had part of a motorcycle visible, had some handlebars visible, not the full motorcycle. And I was really torn. Does that count as a motorcycle or does that not? And I chose that it did. I said that the handlebars of a motorcycle represented the concept of a motorcycle. And so therefore, that photo had a motorcycle in it. And the CAPTCHA decided that I am, in fact, a robot. So that throws my entire life plan into question. This whole computer simulation universe thing is making more and more sense to me. Greg Flowers Music, you may, in fact, be one of the channels we need to know. I do not, at this point, know of your channel. So you will not be featured today, but I will be glad to go back and check you out, and then I will be able to answer that question. I cannot guarantee you that I am not a robot, but I can guarantee you I'll check out your channel after this. So I'm not saying these are the only 4 channels you ever need to know. These are just 4 that I've really enjoyed and thought needed some more exposure, and I can give out a little bit of that. Is it worth changing the Jensen 10-inch in a Princeton reissue? Are there other things you can address its poor handling of bass at higher levels? Joe Blogs asks. Yeah, it's absolutely worth it. The Jensen 10-inch in a Princeton reissue, it's going to depend on which Jensen. They have some that are quite good and some that are quite terrible. Even the good ones are a bit bright. If you Joe have a Princeton reissue and you put a WGS G10C or ET10, you'll be thrilled with its handling of bass. But there are other things you can do inside the Princeton if you're a guy like me or Brad. But if you're not, it can be quite a bit of money to have a Princeton reissue destupidified, whereas changing speakers is pretty simple and relatively inexpensive. Hey, Colby Jack, thanks very much. He says, where do you think the Coffee Fairy likes to go to lunch? Oh, I have some suspicions where she likes to go to lunch, and I think I'll take her there tomorrow. So thank you very much, Colby Jack, for that. I will tell her that probably tomorrow is Sunday, so it'll be a brunch. So maybe you'll buy her mimosa, and I'll tell her it was from you. Hey, yeah, Darren Farrell, Joe, he says he's happy with his G10C in his Princeton. He loves it. So very good. Yanov says, I found a solution to the Fender 68 buzz. You hook up a Dr. Z brake light attenuator, take 2 dB down, and no more buzz at any volume. No, it's not that you're removing the buzz. You're just not hearing the buzz as much. I'm sorry. I think now would be a good time to take our first intermission. And then when we come back, we're going to do the next channel on the list. Then we'll get to some questions, and then we'll do the 4th channel, and we'll see where the day takes us. So for right now, we're going to take about a 7-minute intermission. See you guys in a little bit. Hey, I have a confession to make. I was thinking about the thing stuff I was gonna say about the next featured channel while I was on that little break, and I totally forgot to pee. So I'm just gonna go do that real quick. All right, the side effect of drinking all this coffee. And I just said pee in front of the world. I would never have said that before I had kids. My kids are in their 20s now, early 20s. But I went through the whole period of pee and go potty and all that stuff. We still do it with the dog. And it ruined my vocabulary. So I just hit the head. All right, before we get to the next questions, I want to talk about the next channel. And one of the things I've been thinking about from this channel is how I present the sound of amps on my own channel. I've discussed this, have a video called How Much Should I Lie to You? Let me get that. I don't know if it's dandruff or cigarette ash, but black is a cruel thing for the camera. When I record an amp, I stick a mic in front of it, you know. And I try to be consistent. So if I was micing this AC4 here, I would just stick it a little bit more accurately than this, but just put it pretty much right at the edge of the cone and the dust cap, within an inch of the grill cloth. And that's about as much thought as I give to it. And a lot of times when I'm comparing two different amps on the channel, they're running through the same cab, so the mic position doesn't move, and I just change the signal going into the cabinet from different amps. And that's at least consistent. And for some videos, I will really take time and just move the mic slightly until I get the sound in the phones that I really want, and I'll do some test recordings before I start to do the video. And so some of my videos, the guitar sounds quite good, but I've been very careful only to run an SM57, typically, straight into my audio interface with a clean, uncolored preamp, and then no EQ, no compression, none of the stuff that we do to make guitar sound good on playback. All I will do is do level corrections, so that if I play a clean part and later play an overdrive part, the clean part's not down here and the overdrive's not up here. Because on playback, you turn your whole system up to hear the clean, then the overdrive part takes your head off, or you have your system set so the overdrive sounds good and then the clean's too quiet. So that's the only tweaking I do, because it's honest. But it doesn't really give a good recording. It doesn't give you what you're used to hearing from a guitar. And so unless you're a studio engineer who's used to hearing dry, unprocessed, on anything, SM57 recordings of a close mic speaker, it doesn't sound good to you. But if I make it sound good to you, is it still an accurate representation of what the amp sounds like versus what the processing sounds like? Now, I've got Neve plugins, API plugins. I've got a Mo2 M2 here. It's very nice, quiet, neutral preamp. I can run a distressor plugin, Pultec stuff, if I wanted to put a Fairchild on there, all virtual, but I can get the sounds that you're going to hear in this next guy's videos, but I'm not sure whether I should. And I want to know what you guys think about that. Should I continue to be flat, uncolored, kind of unflattering, but the same from amp to amp to amp, versus this is how awesome this amp sounds? Because if my point is that, say, the stock X model sounds okay, but my mods on the same model sound fantastic, how do you know that I didn't go in there and say, all right, I'm going to really sculpt the sound for the one that I did, and the one that stock, I'm just kind of make it sound not so great? Because there's always creative choices. The flip side of the creative choice is, unless you were to play back my flat recording of, say, a deluxe reverb with an SM57 at 95 dB, you're not hearing what the mic really heard, because our ears contribute to the sound by, our ears don't hear linearly. We add compression, we add distortion within our heads. And so when we hear a loud sound, it's got distortion, it's got nonlinear things happening. We know it's loud, it's exciting, it's potentially a threat. We're very engaged, and our entire core of the brain says, focus on that. Our brains like that kind of stimulation, because it could be a tiger. That's when you hear a sudden loud noise in the environment a long time ago, you had to pay attention to it. So a lot of what engineers do on the playback is that they will introduce those harmonic distortions and saturations. They'll hit a mic pre-hard. They'll use a tape compression emulator. They'll use a compressor. They'll use an EQ. All these little tricks which make it sound back when you play back at 65, 70 dB, like the amp has the same excitement that it does at its actual volume of 90 to 100 plus dB. And it's a slippery slope. So thus far, I have not done any of that. I might start doing that from time to time, or like, here's what the mic heard versus here's how it would normally be presented to you. But anyway, this next channel is a guy who has excellent playback sounds, because he's not demonstrating. He doesn't need to show what the amp actually sounds like. He needs to show you how he uses it and the sounds you can get with it, which is a different thing. I don't know whether he's using mics, an aux, impulse responses, all these things. Hopefully he'll answer on the channel. I know he's a subscriber, but I really liked his approach to things. I like the amount of work that goes into his videos, because if you've ever done a video, you know it's a lot of work. And when you see his videos on comparing different pickups in the same guitar, like 8 sets of PAFs and a 335, that's a lot of behind-the-scenes work. That's a week's worth of work for a 40-minute video. And he doesn't have that many subscribers. And let's see if we can change that. So, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the fantastic sounds and fantastic playing and fantastic presentation of Yeatzee Guitar.
Have you guys ever wondered just how similar a Gibson reissue is to vintage?
Hear the room space around it? That's not a dry mic. Consistent playing from clip to clip like that, that's really hard. Anyway, that's a short sense of what he gives you. That's too short. I know that damn thing. I put more in the clip than played there, I'm pretty sure. Just 1 second. Dang this thing. Every week I'm learning a new bit of software. I'll try this one more time, because I think it cut off the end of Paul's clip that I had prepared as well. And that's not what I intended at all. because I know that there was some other stuff for Yeatzee that I thought was important to show you guys. I may have to go back and show you more of Paul's too. Where'd I put this thing? Sorry. Someday I'll be extremely professional about this. Right now I'm still learning how to get all this shit going. So there it is. All right. Yeatzee. All right. Let's play this one more time.
Have you guys ever wondered just how similar a Gibson reissue
can you hear
is
it?
to vintage?
Why is that? Why is it?
Just how similar a Gibson reissue is to vintage?
Just a second.
Have you guys ever wondered just how similar a Gibson? Have you guys ever wondered just how similar a Gibson reissue is to vintage?
There it is. Sorry, I just forgot that it wasn't. Huh. It just ended there. Well, crap. I know I'd shown a bit more. I thought that was going to be the bit of his pickup comparison thing. Huh. Maybe I just made a stupid mistake last night at 2 o'clock in the morning when I was setting that up. Sorry. I'm trying to get fancy on the channel and just give you more information. Let's see real fast. Favorite speaker for Deluxe Reverb. There's so many great choices, but for Deluxe Reverb, most players around here really like the ET65 and the G12C from Warehouse, and the various Celestians are always good choices as well. I'm not a big fan of most of the Jensens out there. I think the Alessandro from Eminence is another good choice. Always use an artificial center tap for heaters. Braxton protects the power transformer in case of a short. I've talked about that in a lot of videos, including last week's live chat. Emmett Otter, I'm glad to know that your AC15-1 is purring. That's good. Yeah, Ganjam, if you pull 2 power tubes from a 50-watt Marshall, you need to increase the, go from 8 to 16 or 4 to 8. You also may need to rebias it. You don't have to do the mismatch on the primary. Mesa certainly gets away with it in their amps, where they change all kinds of things and they don't change everything that needs to be changed. I don't know you in East Tennessee, Aaron. Sorry. Hey, Yi Kwang. Supro Amulet and Fender Princeton Reverb 65. The Fender 65 reissue Princeton is a much better amp than anything made under the Supro name since about 1970. Do not buy the stuff made today sold as Supro. But the Fender Princeton Reverb 65 is a good choice. Dan says to do the impedance the other way. Maybe I misremembered. Sorry, I'm away from my notes. Either Dan's right or I'm right. Look it up. Dan's probably right. I just forget. So now we're getting to the point where people are talking about the Time Preservation Society, which is great. Hope you all enjoy this. I wish I could enjoy the chat at the same time that you guys do. I have to answer these damn questions. Oh, Craig Flowers. Oh, you just got a big old beast with that 65 twin reverb with EVs right out of Mickey Gillies Theater. Whew. Bet that's I bet that's loud. And I'll have to check out your channel after this. Never buy the SV20H. It's garbage. I don't know about the 1980X. I know the 74X, and I know the 87. I don't know if there's some. I don't know about the Marshall 1980X. Maybe is that a typo? But the SV20H is terrible. Sorry. 1987. Yeah, the 1987X is okay. If you get the 1987X, the effects loop is not fantastic, but usually usable. The main problem with the 1987 and the 1959 reissue is the two heater resistors going to a heater balance trim pot on the board. That trim pot's rated for like a 1/3 watt, and it burns all the time, and it's not necessary. So what you do is you take out the trim pot and take out the two stock resistors in the heater supply, and they're mounted on turrets, which makes it real easy. So you just take those off the turrets, you take off the stupid trim pot, and then you just do 100 ohm half watt resistors from each heater turret to the ground there, and then you're great. That's the main problem. That and sometimes when that fails, it can cause some problems to the cathode of V2. If you look at Merlin Blinco's article on AC coupled cathode followers, which is what is used to drive the tone stack in a 1987 or most Marshalls or most Fender Tweed Bassmans or most AC30s, Blinco shows some stuff you can do with a couple resistors and a diode to make V2 work a lot better, and I do recommend that. Let's see. I scroll down too fast. I'm trying really hard to get everyone's questions. I don't know if I'm going to be able to today. I've got so many. Let's see. C12Ns sound a lot better than C12Ks. C12Ns are actually good speakers. The modern Jensen, well, you got a Silver Face Pro reverb. So those C12Ns are probably original, even if they're reissues. The reissues are a little bit bright, but that's it. No, C12N is a very different speaker than a C12K. C12Ks are garbage. C12Ns are what Fender would have put in a 1965 twin reverb. I have watched Audio University. I think it's a little more in the studio weeds than most of my viewers are going to be interested in. I think Time Preservation Society covers enough of that for those who want a little bit of that world, but he's just does phenomenal videos with a great personality. And you know, if you want to learn more and more, there are other channels like Audio University. I'm sure there are a lot of good channels on that kind of stuff out there. But you know, I just you know, can't recommend everyone, and I have not watched enough of Audio University to know if I agree with them on everything, and that's pretty important. How do you get hold of me to bring the SVT to me? RRD. Email me at info@sonicaudio.com, and I will find it. I am slammed with emails, but I do try. Hey, Tommy. Yeah, all the channels that I mentioned are going to be added to the live stream when I'm done. I didn't want to put them in the description before I started because then it ruins all the suspense. Active pickups work with small practice amps, large practice amps, no problem. Mr. Rudolph, Dave123. I don't have any thoughts of Hamstead amps because I know nothing of Hamstead amps, Pro or Con. Hey, Raul Drake, 72. Thank you very much. Let's see. He's got a 5F6A clone made by his local electrician's kid, and he's tuition. It's great, but recently after 20 minutes, 1 hour, it stops working, just makes a loud hum, fart noise. Ideas. Is probably one of the power tubes has gone south on you. That's assuming that he did everything right. It's going to be the rectifier tube or the power tubes, or one of them. And if it's making a loud hum fart noise, it's more likely to be one of the power tubes is gone south, and the other one is misbiasing. But it could be something else. It could be filter cap's bad. That's as far as I can diagnose it remotely. Sorry. Tweed Princeton speaker. I'm not a huge fan of 8-inch speakers. There's always a big limiting factor on an 8-inch speaker. 10 inches is fantastic. But, you know, the 8 inches have a role. You have to remember that a lot of great recordings done with 8-inch speakers, yeah, but it wasn't just the speaker. The sound of Layla is not that. You know, what console did they have at that studio? How are they hitting the tape? What was the size of the tape? Who was the engineer? See my earlier comments. Hey, Yeatzee. Hopefully you got to hear me talk about your channel just a minute ago. Yeatzee, you know, like I said, he's processing stuff to make it sound better, and I'm doing stuff flat, which has its own pitfalls. Pros and cons to every approach. The stuff on Layla's, that's not what an 8-inch Champ speaker sounds like if you're in the room with it. So, yeah, reviews are tricky, Brad. Hey, it's an AC-10. It's a 1964. Actually, no, it's not an AC-10. It's an AC-4. It's a 1964 AC-4 behind me. I've got a video on the channel on it. The owner had me do a bunch of work, and he came by today, and I was able to show him that, hey, the speaker that he bought for me put in is crappy. So it's going to get a new speaker before he takes it home. I have not gotten my Rev Star yet. I'm very jealous of Scott, who does have his Rev Star. I'm hoping to get a Rev Star at some point. I also want to look at that transformer circuit and see if it's worth keeping or whether I need to change it out for something better. Hey, T wants to know what headphones I'd recommend for listening to YouTube, music, and channels like my own and guitar reviews. Greetings from Small Flag, whose colors I can't not make out. I'm sorry, red-green colorblind. Greetings from Small Flag, whose colors I cannot make out. I should know that. Is that France or Italy? I can barely see it, though. It depends on your price range and how serious you are about hearing things. These biodynamic DT770s are about $160. They're phenomenal for the price. The Sony, what are they called? MDR 7506s are very much industry standard for about $100. Audio-Technica's got some, the 40 and the 50 that range from about 100 to 150, which people like. I think that they're not as well made and that they're really bassy. So people who are used to beats would like them a lot, but I think they're extremely flubby in the lows. These are very neutral. The Sonys are very, let's say, articulate in the highs. I would choose these or maybe the Audio-Technica 40s as more everyday wide range listening than either these Sonys, which are really bright, or the Audio-Technica 50s, which I think are too bassy. But you know, for some guys, they're just going to be happy with the cheap little earbuds that come with their phone. Now, the cheap little wired earbuds that come with your phone, I don't care if it's a Samsung or an Apple, they're not terrible. I mean, they're not great, but they're not terrible. It's when people start paying a lot of money for Bluetooth strapped onto that same cheap little $20 headphone, and you know, all the Apple. You see people with the little white stems coming out of their ears. Those sound like shit. And I tried some in-ear monitor things, and they sounded great, but they hurt my ears. I've tried 4 different tips for those, 4 different kinds of tips, and I can't find any that don't hurt my ears. So I'm just going back to good old headphones. And I love these for music and for stuff. One other consideration with headphones is these are 80 ohms. I think the Sony's are 69 ohms, and that can be hard for certain things to drive. Some built-in headphone amps and audio interfaces and cell phones and stuff can't really drive these, so they're not going to be as loud. There's a 32 ohm version of these biodynamics, which work with more consumer equipment, much louder with a phone or say like a Focusrite or Behringer Pre, or most consumer level stuff that has headphones out. That would be my recommendation. Either the AT4040, I think, no, that's a microphone. Well, they've got HD. Audio-Technica has a range of headphones in the $100 to $150 range. They have a 30, a 40, a 50. I think the 40's kind of the sweet spot. And I love the biodynamics. If you can swing up to about $150, the biodynamic 80 ohms if you have more pro gear, 250 if you have seriously pro gear, and 32 ohms if you have consumer gear. Hey, Kim Ladd, with your Silverface Princeton with the hum, you have one or two things. You're describing a ground loop or a faulty ground somewhere, but it could be exacerbated by if it's humming like that with nothing plugged in. The shunting jacks may not be shunting on your input jack, so it may not be grounding out the input with nothing plugged in. So I would make sure that the tip is truly being shunted to ground with nothing plugged in, and then I would make sure that the volume, that the grounds are all good and the filter caps are all good. Who used to pitch for the Mets? An amazing guitar player and sings too. Juke Socks Zero. Huh, I'll have to check that out. Yeah, feel free to give each other your recommendations for channels. You know, I don't know all channels. I'm not the gatekeeper of good and bad channels. It's just that I happen to have a captive audience, so I'm going to subject you to my opinions. Dave Ellers says that mic is pretty tame on the high frequencies already. You're not far off, I think. I'm on my Kali's. I mean, this mic here, the 57. Yeah, I don't have. Let's see, what EQ do I have on here? I don't have much. I think I just have a little high pass. Given that, let's see, filters. Yeah, I've got a high pass. And then a little notch around 250, and then a little notch around, where's that? 5.5K to help with my sibilance. That's all I've got. I didn't want to do too much because it's, you can really fuck things up. And when I listen back to these things on cell phones, it sounds much brighter. I'm listening through these, and then I listen back as well on my HS7s, and it sounds very neutral, but not hyped. Good luck to you, Dan Sullivan there. The 59 reissue, does it need the same work done as the other reissue amps? It needs different work done. Mostly, it's, every 20 years, filter caps, and sadly, they use the same IC brand caps, so those do need to be changed. Other than that, it doesn't seem to have the same problems that the Deluxe and the Twin do as far as traces on the board being in the wrong place. They're really good amps, the 59 reissue, especially if you can get the older ones, which had the Eminence, the blue Eminence Alnico speakers, which are probably the closest, the next best thing to having the old CTS Alnicos. Agnator IE4 preamp Paul Drennan asks about, is it serviceable long-time keeper? Yeah, Bruce makes good stuff. The IE4 is fantastic. Bruce is still very much around. He's up in Detroit, And I'm sure he stands behind his stuff. And if anything went wrong with it, almost any good tech could take care of it. Hey, Yeatzee, your first baby is due today. Good Lord, and you're here? Well, I guess it's a good distraction from all the stress. Congratulations to you and yours. Conjunction junction is a long-time favorite, as is adjectives and adverbs. Farmer David, he says he's 67 years old and just got his first jazz master. Well, you're going to like recommendation 4. Maybe I'll go ahead and do recommendation 4 off that. He's just got his first jazz master, instant new number 1. Why didn't I try one before? Well, here's a guy that I would agree with you. Now, he's not far behind my channel as far as subscribers, but he's so niche. His focus is so narrow that a lot of guys aren't going to try his stuff out. And even if you don't care about Fender offset guitars, even if you have no interest in a Jazz Master or a Jaguar or any of the other wonderful things the Bass 6s, I love watching this guy, even though I don't own one and I don't plan to buy one, but he's a really knowledgeable guy. He comes across, I don't know him, comes across as a really sincerely nice person. He's very giving of information, and he kind of is the internet expert in a very narrow field of guitars a lot of people don't pay attention to. And his passion is infectious, and he's really funny. And I think you guys need to know about him. And he plays some amps built by my buddy Joshua Strange. So, all these things are good. And so I'd like to bring to you, those of you who don't know him already, Mike Adams, a.k.a. Puisheen.
Hey everybody, it's your old pal Mike. I hope you're happy, healthy, and safe. Welcome back to the channel for this episode of On the Bench. And let me tell you, it's a very special episode. Something that a lot of companies don't pay attention to. From the factory, nuts are often cut a little too high, I believe. And that can mean, pulling sharp every time you hit an E chord or an F. Let's find the appropriate file and start going for it. Now there's one thing that I have to do before I do anything to the guitar, and that is drill out the post holes on the Fender mute plate, and I've already done that. Say action.
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 Now, what the hell? Now, I know that the video that I made for this thing is longer than that. Just one second. I've got to find out what's going on, because I've shown 4 channels and they've all been abbreviated, and I don't know why. So just bear with me for a second. I want to do these guys a real service. I don't want it to be like, thanks for almost making me look good. I had more of that. I know I did. So let me just check something real quick. OBS is so weird. Talk amongst yourselves while I figure this out. All right, so it's not the fault of OBS. What the hell? DaVinci? What'd you do to me? Well, I'll figure it out later. There was a great thing on that Puisheen video there, and it was showing fine. I guess there's some setting where the exported video in my video editor was shorter than I told it to be, and I didn't catch that, because when I was confirming that everything worked here, everything seemed to work, because I pressed play, it started, and everything looked great, I ended it. And I'd done a test on the Time Preservation Society first, I think, and it seemed to be fine. I'll figure it out going forward. Well, one of the things at the end of the Puisheen's video there, he was showing how to adjust the bend in the arm, the curve of the arm in a Jazz Master. and he just took the damn thing and bent it with his hands. I'm a big guy. His arms are like twice the size of mine. I could just do that. He just does it. So he's a really nice guy, and that's a damn good thing for the rest of us. But anyway, Puisheen is really funny. He doesn't, it's funny how people of certain mindsets find each other. He has a relatively small channel. He's like about 30K. Oh, I'm so much bigger. I think I'm at 38 something now. Anyway, but two of his people who follow him, who have sent him guitars to work on, are Alton Brown and from Food TV, and Adam Savage from Mythbusters. So he's, for those of us who like how things work, the guys who found who really professionally want to know how things work, whether it's food or explosions, et cetera, they found their way to Puisheen, and they've sent him guitars to work on. Just because he has that same kind of thing. So if you like Mythbusters, if you like Good Eats, if you like my channel, though I'm not as funny as they are, he's doing that kind of thing. So's the guy from I don't know his name, though I have a guess, from the Time Preservation Society. If you watch his videos, you'll see why I don't know his name. But, I have a feeling that if I met these people in real life, we'd have a really good time. And I watched a Puisheen video, and I kind of wanted Jazzmaster. I was 5 feet away from Elvis Costello's Jazzmaster, the one that says Elvis Costello on the neck. And I almost had the balls to ask if I could pick it up, but I knew that would be the end of that gig. But it was cool. It was cool to see. His tour manager carries it with him everywhere in a case. It doesn't go on the bus. It's hand carried by the tour manager. There's one guy in all of America who's allowed to change his, do any work on it. I'm sure he's got to change his strings. Other than that, just one guy that's trusted with that Jazzmaster. Scott Brockway, he does microphones that cost $20 too. Time Preservation is not all high-end stuff. He does everything from like $50 mics to $20,000 mics, and everything in between. I don't have any opinion on Headstrong amps. I know that Zach likes them quite a lot, and he's got pretty good ears. I used to have a Royer R121. It was stolen, and I know who did it, but I just couldn't prove it. Otherwise, he'd be dead. I've got like 5 SM57s. I used to have a large microphone collection. I wish I still had that Royer, and I wish I still had the 2 Neumann TLM103s. And a couple of the Bayer M201s would be nice to have. Anyway, R121's cool. It's not the only one to have. One of the reasons I use 57 for everything in these channels is that most people have a 57, or at least know what 57 sounds like, so it's relatable. If I show up and I'm using a U47, the people who are interested in buying a $600 amp have no idea what that mic sounds like, and those who use that mic all the time are not going to buy a $600 amp. So it's a Gabriel Luis says, "Hi, I have a 5F2 Princeton style amp that's not bright enough. Do you think changing the income cap input cap for a 470 680 picofarad would help?" I wouldn't mess with that. Just put a bright cap on the volume control. You stick a 100 picofarad or 250 picofarad cap on the volume pot, you'd probably be fine with that. I wouldn't go radical like 470 680 picofarad for an input cap. Yeah, Tinkle RD. I went through my days of saying Tinkle. Kids just do a number on you, man. Yeah, it's okay if you mention a great guitar information channel. Richard Clark. Yeah. Don't get me started on that guy, Scott. I won't say that. Let's see. Victor Beebe, 58th anniversary bandmaster. Gary McKinney wants to know what I think of Jupiter caps. Are they worth the money or is it just hype? They're fine. They don't sound bad. They're really pretty. If you like them, that's fine. I've used them in amps where guys really wanted them to be red or yellow and look kind of like the old ones. The old ones, the old Astrons, the red and yellow Astrons, are garbage caps, and they're all leaky and need to be replaced. And if someone wants me to use Jupiters and they're willing to pay $7+ a cap, I'll use them. If for the average mere mortals who care more about how it sounds than any of the rest of it, my preferred cap for almost any actual use these days is a Vitier MKT 1813, which I think sounds as good as anything out there, and costs less and is consistent, and has an accurately marked outer foil for those who care about that, and the leads are really nice and solid, so there's no flop to them. They have nice mechanical support. But yeah, I'll use a Jupiter, and I would never be like, oh, he's forcing me to use a Jupiter. Hey, if someone wants to use Jupiters, that's fine. If they want to use Synergy or Sozo, whatever, they're fine. But that's it. They're fine. Thanks, Rick Dale. Yeah, Tone Talk is fun. Let's see if I still have these. I think they're in the trash. So last November, I was on Tone Talk, speaking of which was a great honor. And that episode was sponsored by Sweetwater. And I took that opportunity while I knew that Sweetwater was watching to complain that every time I got something from them, they sent me either like sweet tarts or bit of honey, which is like the world's nastiest candy substitute. So you're like, oh, a little bag of oh shit, it's bit of honey. So someone at Sweetwater took a note of that because I just ordered $700 worth of monitors from them. I got some Yamaha HS7s. You know what they sent me? Sweet tarts and fucking bit of honeys. Back in the trash they go. $700 worth of fuck Lyle. I have to buy my own damn candy. Anyway. Bambule says, hey, also a friend gave me his blues junior sort out, changed filter caps, good. Cooled the bias, great. Changed the diodes, very good, because the 4006 is underrated. Up the screen grids, that's great. Anything else to make that thing more bulletproof? Yeah, change the, if you really care about the guy, change the input jack to a Switchcraft L12A, that's the long bushing 12A, and get the Switchcraft, the matching insulator washers that come with it for that. And it's really easy to change out because the plastic input jack is crappy and it's really easy to do. So that's pretty much it. That, and change out with any of the Fender reissues or blues amps, change out that stupid black plastic molded speaker cable for a separate plug. I don't care whether you use Switchcraft or Neutrik or Amphenol, with a real cable, soldered preferably. Flat and uncolored is my vote. See, we're finally getting to answering the questions I have about presenting the amp stuff. All right, so far people are saying they like the unprocessed. That's good. See, the trouble with the unprocessed is, see if I can do this on the screen. You're used to hearing stuff where the average level, so see if I can do this on the screen. Right to left is messing me up. Where the waveform goes all the way up. Gotta go the other way. Let's start over here. All right, so that's the waveform on what you're used to hearing. So it's filling everything and it's really loud. So your peaks are right here and your average is right here. The whole thing's really loud. In reality, the unprocessed thing is the average stuff is here and peaks go up here. So if I set it so that the peaks are at -1 dB FS, it's not going to clip, but here's the peak and here's the average information. So it's not going to sound that loud. You listen to my videos, you'll notice my voice is a lot louder than the guitar because I'm processing my voice, because I'm not trying to sell you the microphone or me. I'm selling you the amp, or not selling you the amp, but presenting the information so you can make a thing. So my voice, I process. And so I'm all compressed, and here's my peak, but here's my average level, and there's not a huge disparity, so I'm very audible. If I were to make my videos realistic so that the amp was as much louder than my voice as it is in real life, like if I'm playing through a deluxe reverb on 4 and I'm talking at the same time, you don't hear what I'm saying. So my level for the voice would be down here, my level for the amp would be up here, and no one would hear me on YouTube. It's a trick. So if I were to slightly process the guitar, I do level match, so the clean stuff's about the same level as the dirty stuff, but some leveling and compression to lower the peaks down, if nothing else, and then bring the entire thing up so you have a better average on playback. I may go to that area of things because it's a tricky thing to do. How honest can you be? Well, an honest playback representation of a 57 on a Blues Junior, you would have to play back at 90 dB, 85 to 95 dB. Deluxe reverb, go up to 100 dB. If I get a 50 watt Marshall, 130 watts, 130 dB playback. Most of you guys won't have the speakers for that, and your neighbors won't appreciate it because then you're playing at the same level that the mic heard it. And it's tough. Hey, Matt Fields. See, here I'm talking about Yeatzee, and he's watching me talk about him, so I'm interested in reading what the comments are now. The aux box is good. I have concerns about how healthy it is for amps long term. But yeah, Yeatzee, I'm sorry. I did have more of your video, so it was going to show some of your PAF comparisons. And like I said, I don't know what went wrong, and they all just cut the end off. So, God dang it, I will fix it too. By the way, any of the 4 videos that I just showed you, don't form an opinion on what you heard based on your phone audio. Go back and watch them. Find their channels, find their actual videos, and listen on real speakers or headphones. Same thing for what I'm doing. If I'm showing you what an amp sounds like and you're listening on your iPhone or your Galaxy or whatever, you're just getting the small, you're looking through the peephole rather than being in the bedroom. Let's see. Panhead says, I've come to expect the audio going through the O-scope. Not mad, I just noticed when it's not there. Well, that was something just to get some visual interest behind me, really. It's a little bit gimmicky. I've got a new gimmick on the way. I've got a little lamp that'll sit back there that'll do the same thing. I still have that little spot of color there with the O-scope, but the O-scope is not hooked up as easily to this system that I'm using now as it was before. All 3 of those 335s sounded quite different to me. I think I liked the sound of the red one the best. But the Sunburst is so much prettier than the others that I don't care what it sounds like. I want the Sunburst one. In fact, I've got that same guitar pretty much. Mine's a 335 as opposed to a 345, and mine's from like 10 years ago as opposed to 56 years ago, so I could afford to have it. It's in the other room right now, but you guys have seen that. Yeah, check out the full video. Thanks for putting that up there, Brad. It's a great video. RGB backlighting, yeah. Yeah, the pickup videos, I'm still in awe that you did that, because that's just an insane amount of work. I do want to talk to you about your how you're recording your guitars, Yeatzee. Maybe you could email me your phone number or something, because you're getting really great results. And I know how to do it the ways that I've always done it, but you may have a faster way to get it for YouTube and stuff. Just maybe I'll consider doing like, here's unprocessed and here's processed. Here's what you could expect if you were going in the studio versus here's what the mic actually hears. It won't do it for every video, but maybe for some videos, that would be a good approach to do. Let's see. All right, back to the people talking about the channel that shall not be named. Let's see. I scrolled too far down. Now I scrolled too far up. Coming up on another break time. All right. Broken Strings. Thank you, man. He says, I have a JMI 36 clone. Is it normal to have a very woolly normal channel and a very narrow rotational range between 3 and 5 o'clock where the treble and bass knobs on the top boost channel sound balanced? Let's break that into two different things. The woolly normal channel is totally normal. It was designed at a time when guitar was expected to sound more like Jim Hall. And it was also designed to be something used for bass as well. So if you take, since it's a clone, not an actual JMI, if you were to change the 47 nanofarad coupling cap on the output of the normal channel V1 stage, first triode, to a 10 nanofarad, which is what would be found in the AC15, you'd have a really nice high-pass filter. So you'd be flat down to about 70 hertz. So all the guitar is still there, just not going to be flubby beneath that. And then add a small bright cap to it. Stick a 100 to 250 picofarad bright cap across the volume pot. Probably 100 would do you fine. And you'd have a really nice sounding normal channel. It's going to be darker than the top boost, but not tremendously darker. Or you can go as large as 22 nanofarad on that coupling cap. If you have a very narrow rotational range between 3 and 5 o'clock, the top boost circuit is very odd, and you will never use the knobs between 3 and 5 o'clock unless there's something wrong with you. If you're coming to it from Marshalls or Fenders, forget everything that you know. Set them to noon. Turn the bass up to 2 o'clock. Play something. Now, while something is ringing out, turn the treble up to 2 o'clock. Listen to what happens to the mids. Play something else. Turn the bass down slightly. Listen to the mid sweep. Turn the bass back up slightly. Listen to the mids change. Turn the treble down a little bit. Listen. Turn the treble up a little bit more. Now, to turn them both to 10 o'clock, repeat that process where they're just moving slightly, kind of in the same zone, but just one's moving, then the next one's moving. So between 10 and 2 o'clock is a typical range you're going to use those. It's going to depend on the pot taper. It's also going to depend on where the knob is put on, because a lot of Voxes, the set screws are set so that the pointer is going straight down when it's at 0. So I'm assuming 5 and 7 are the max for this purpose. They may not be the case. You can also try turning them both off, and then you get a huge mid-range boost, very Kinks-esque. I've shown that in some videos. But check out all my Vox videos. I've got some stuff specifically on that tone stack. It's an odd tone stack. Let's put it this way. And I think it's time for a second intermission. So we will see everyone back here in 7 minutes. Or we're going to end the intermission a little short. I figured out why 3 of the 4 channels I wanted to feature, their videos were cut short. I changed video editing software. I changed from Premiere to DaVinci, which I freaking love it. But I created the one for the Time Preservation Society first, and I used his channel trailer as, I just grabbed it off the web. I grabbed all their videos off the web, obviously, and I figured this was the fairest of possible use because I'm not promoting it as my own stuff. I'm saying, hey, these guys are great. Check them out. I don't think any of them would mind. I didn't ask in advance. If anyone's offended, you're weird for that. But I'd used the Time Preservation Society channel, which was like 3.5 minutes, and it was already kind of a greatest hits thing. So I just said, I'm going to set it to a minute. Just grab enough of it to give a sense of the guy. They can watch his full 3.5 minute trailer, watch his other videos. If I showed his full trailer, I'm just showing the trailer, and I'm kind of, I wanted you to go back and find his channel and see the jokes that I didn't use in there. So I set it to 1 minute. And the others were all like 1.5 minutes, not because they're 30 seconds better than Time Preservation Society, but because the way they present information takes a little longer. And I must have set an in and out point at 1 minute. So while I was seeing the entire video display and it looked like the entire video was rendering, it must have they were all 1 minute long. So that I'm still learning the new software. But I feel like I did them a disservice, even though I'm trying to help them out, because I was very careful to end each segment on the other 3 channels kind of with like a real sense of who they are as people and how they present themselves. And that just got chopped off. So 1 minute's not enough for any of those. Go back and watch all their videos. Let's see here. Let's try to go through a little bit faster. And I'm sorry, Yeatzee. Yeah, I'm always behind. It's very frustrating. It'd be much better if we could all talk at the same time. It wouldn't be a total disaster at all. Hey, Jimmy John, I'm glad to have saved you from those things. Those are not good apps. Yeah. The 65 Princeton reissue of those is by far, much better amp than any of those. But again, if you're looking at a budget, look at my Amps Under $500 video. If you need a whole bunch of different sounds, the Katana 50 is fine. For most people, it's not expensive. If something goes wrong with it, get another one for $300 later. Paul's using one, on the channel I featured earlier. You can get really good sounds out of it. But, and if you need something, you want tubes and some flexibility, the Marshall DSL 40C and 40CR are pretty good choices. But the amps under $500, I still think that the AC15 Custom 1 is by far the best choice because you won't outgrow it. I mean, even if you get other things that do other things, other amps that do louder, amps that do higher gain, have different features, the AC15 is always going to be a real good sounding amp. Let's see, my go-to preamp tubes these days are the ones which are in stock, which has been a problem for the last 3 years. Right now, I've had good luck with they're branded as TAD. Some of them are definitely well-sorted, relabeled JJs, but the sorting that the TAD is doing has been really good in my experience. So it's not like when you get a Gold Lion cryogenic Sovtech that's just stuck in a different cooler looking box and sold for $100. For a modern 1950s 15 wattish tweed sounding amp, you get a Victoria. It depends on your budget, but a Victoria 5E3 Deluxe copy is going to be awesome, Jimmy John. But you're looking at $2,000. You have to remember that when you look at Fender price lists and you adjust for inflation, a Deluxe Reverb is a $2,800 amp, but Twin Reverb is almost $4,000. And, people were buying these all the time back then. People made more money back then. The economy was better. Let's not go down that road, but, when you get a Twin Reverb, for $1,500 new, and it used to be a $4,000 amp, There's a reason it doesn't cost $4,000 from Fender these days. If you have a 6 ohm load, you put the amp on 8. I'm kind of trying to go through some of the faster ones. Two Rocks, I haven't had too many come in. They're fine. I think they're maybe the reputation is a little inflated, but they're well built. And I don't know what I've said in other videos, I don't know what their overhead is like. So I don't know how many that they make a year. So there are a lot of things that go into the price of an amp, but they're well built amps and they sound good. Well, people are seeming to like my my stock, unprocessed, unflattering recording. So I won't abandon that. I may offer some. And here's what it would sound like if you wanted to make it ready for the record. The Sur Ombres are a great thing. It's not really a tweed sound. The Brown Deluxe, the 62 Deluxe, is a weird amp for Fender. It's right in between the two. It's more ZZ Top than any of the tweed amps are. I'm still trying to get my own amps made. It's been really, really hard to get the stuff I need for that. So it's kind of on hold right now. Blue and gold sound very different from each other, but different is not better or worse. It's just different. Some guys are going to be happy with either. Some guys are going to have a strong preference for one or the other, and the people will have preferences for different speakers because that's how the world works. I have no thoughts on Shaw amps. Sorry. I find that the golds sound great for clean, but I don't like the way they break up as much. Conversely, the 90 watt cream Alnicos are fantastic, as are the Eminence Alnico Eric Johnsons. But the Eric Johnsons, again, I would say they're almost only for clean. They sound very strange with distortion, but such a beautiful, beautiful clean sound. Yeah, the Scumebacks are good. Let's see. I don't buy kits either, so I don't keep up with who's making what for kits. I'm sure that, hey, Paul Bendauer says, can someone recommend an off-the-shelf speaker cable replacement for online for a deluxe reverb? I think amprepairparts.com has some stuff like that you can get. That would be fine. You don't have to spend a ton of money for a good speaker cable. It's just that the stuff that comes stock with most modern Fenders is nowhere close to being a good cable. I'm not talking about silver stranded solid core 14 gauge everything. 18 gauge is fine for a combo. I use Mogami cable. I use Neutrik, Switchcraft, and Amphenol plugs, and we're talking like a 3-foot run. These are not 4,000 watt PA amps. We're talking 50 watt Marshall, whatever. Doesn't matter. Swart SDRs are great, but it's not loud enough to really be there with a 15 watt. Though their 5 watt is really, really close. And yeah, the Sur Jazzmaster tributes are kind of cool. They're not quite Jazzmasters, but they are really awesome. There's they're not at all Jazzmasters, though they have visual aesthetics that are similar, but I really like some of the inexpensive things that Music Man, damn it. GNL has some that are really cool. All right, so now we're talking to people talking about Puisheen. Let's see. Yeah, Mike and Mike, Mike Adams Puisheen is one of the mics at Mike and Mike's Guitar Bar. Hey, Time Preservation Society. Cheers, man. And by the way, if you're still watching this, ooh, yours are always cooler, though. Watch his channel if you want to know what the hell I'm talking about. Nathan, I thought it might be Nathan, given your preference for the name Nathan in that video I watched. I think I've seen almost all your videos at this point. Soon I will have watched them all. Oh, yes, I shall watch them all. I really enjoy your work. I know the work that goes into setting all that stuff up, especially when you do this stuff. It's weird. I spend most of my time sitting in an empty room talking to myself, and people like to listen to it after the fact. And here I'm kind of just talking to a bunch of screens and gizmos, and somehow people get there. When you're trying to do humor in videos, which you do very well, you're setting up, I move the camera here, and then that's when the punchline shot is. There's so much planning that goes into these things to make them look effortless on playback. So a lot of respect. Yeah, Yeatzee, leave your production methods here if you can. I mean, you wrote that probably 30 minutes ago, but I want to contact you because I like how you present stuff. And given that you're expecting your first child, I will not have my feelings hurt if you've got to go. Is there a difference in sound tone between full wave rectification versus bridge? No, there's a voltage difference. You're just choosing one or the other in order to get X voltage and current capability with Y transformer and what the price is. Yeah, let's see. Brad's not a fan of 24-inch scale guitars, to be honest, which is odd given how small you are. I can't play a Jaguar either. I love Jazzmasters though. I have a problem playing up the neck on my Gibsons. That scale length is not that much smaller than a Fender. I used to try to play mandolin, and I need a baritone mandolin, something about that long. I got big mitts, maybe not Mike Adams level, but he seems to do just fine with his Jags, and he sounded just fine on that little Duosonic that's in that video. That Duosonic in that video featured was Alton Brown's Duosonic. I loved Alton Brown back when he was doing his little homebrew Good Eats thing out of Atlanta. I haven't seen his new one, but then he became a game show host. Made me very sad. I remember when the Food Network had food and cooking information. Yeah, so you got the phone as your room mic. I've got a very nice, not world class, but I've got an SE8 up here, which I use for my voiceover when I'm working on the bench. And I tried it as a room mic. I've tried using it as a room mic. The trouble is, you hear how crappy my room is. This room, I'm going to do it once I get really cleaned all the way. I'm going to show you guys my workspace. And I've got wire rack shelves full of chassis everywhere. And I've got flat benches and flat work surfaces with metallic things. And I've got windows on two walls and doors on two walls. So that corner behind me there, I wanted to put some kind of bass trap up. And I've got on that door, the window behind, right in front of me, and the window over my shoulder there, I've got blackout curtains. That helps. The fabric helps a little bit. And I've got that big doorway behind me with the velvet curtain. That's kind of a bass trap. But that corner, I have big standing wave stuff. You don't really hear it through this because of the processing I have on the mic. But I tried to use that as a distant mic on the Deluxe Reverb yesterday, and all you heard was this 600 hertz standing wave, which is what it sounds like in the room. So I really need to focus on close mics, but I can make rooms if I need to. I already answered boutique versus Vichy's and Mallory's as far as the caps go. Tube Guide 1975, about 30 minutes ago. Laney, it depends on the period of Laney, RJ Electric. Modern Laneys are budget Laneys. Old Laneys are budget Marshalls. You're not doing any EQ or compression. Now that's impressive. You have a good sounding room then. I have a terrible sounding room because it's not a recording room, it's a workspace. The Neve preamp, the UA stuff, even if you don't use the EQ, there's a sound there. I've got some waves version. I've got the Neve and I've got the API. I prefer the Neve. Even just setting it flat, it has a sound, and I've not used it on guitar, but maybe I'll do some stuff. But compression for YouTube playback, for clean stuff, is really important. The dirty stuff is not quite as critical. I'm impressed that you're able to get that room sound with your phone, but the room makes a big difference. And like I said, this one sucks. This one just truly sucks. Well, you're doing a great job, Yeatzee. A 69 twin stock is absolutely fine, Tobias. The only thing to be concerned with on a 69, most 69 Fenders have that really weird wire that wasn't used in 68 or 70. Really thin stuff, and it can get kind of brittle and microphonic. If that's not an issue. There's also another issue I've run into in some 69s where they would use the wrong taper pots for things. So treble pot would be audio taper instead of J taper. So 10% versus 20 or 30%. Things like that can make a difference. Just that, and if the amp's got the stupid heater balance circuit, I don't remember which years that started, don't use the heater balance circuit, just use 100 ohms to ground. Now people are talking about the bit of honeys, yeah. I'm trying to read. Yeah, the clip that I chose to highlight and the video that was shown, there was some other stuff that didn't get shown after all, was with the Pete Thorne 15IR. That's a really nice sounding recording. All right. Yeah, the 64 Deluxe, Custom Deluxe Reverb is not a good thing for people, Tobias. You did well. Scroll down too far. God dang it. Let's see. I'm not going to be able to answer all the questions today. There's just so many of them. Wow. This is, I think, the biggest chat we've ever had. I'm really amazed and flattered. Thank you, love. More coffee. All right. I'm going to have to go back and read through all the comments because I can't keep up with everything. I mean, scrolling through this thing live is so tough. You see other channels, bigger channels where there's a guy or woman here being the talent, and someone else is sitting there spoon feeding them certain questions, and they're not having to do 18 things at once. I'm not complaining. I'm just saying I'm not very good at this. My next guitar is going to be a 335 with the Floyd Rose. Well, Scott, I'm a little bit tempted by the Lifeson Les Paul. A little bit. I'm not tempted by the price. I'm going to go back and read all your replies, Yeatzee. I do want to talk to you about mics and stuff. I'm considering maybe changing to an MT Buyer M201 instead of the 57 and letting people just get to hear it, or maybe I'll do a comparison. My favorite affordable Vox AC15 is the custom, the C1, not the CC, the C. The C1X if you can afford it. The X just means it has blues instead of greenbacks. But, there's a video I showed of the C1 with minimal mods and the greenbacks, and it just sounds phenomenal. Groovy, Yeatzee. All right, to the second intermission. I'm going to try to... Jimmy John says something important, just a shout out. This is the most chill gathering of guitar-minded folks on the web. None of that Forum-esque arguing, trolling, hyperbolic bullshit. I dig it. Thanks, man. I dig you all. I really appreciate you all taking time out of your lives to come do this with us. And, this is what you guys make it. If no one's here, I'm just an idiot talking into a box. And if I could, I'd respond to each of you in real time. I would love that. It's so hard to make everything work. Thank you very much, Devin. I've heard that people expect me to sound different to look different than I look, and I wish I did some days. But this is what you get. So I mean, my wife is stunning. So apparently I'm doing something right. Either that or she owes me money. But or I owe her money. Anyway, that joke went to weird places. I look like I look, and I sound like I sound. Oh man, 30K is not enough to make a living on YouTube, Matt. It doesn't suck having some extra income from time to time, but J Foster Guitar, got a Super Royal Reverb, brand new tube set, grounded outlet, still getting a faint 60 cycle hum. Any ideas? Yeah, sell it. Supros are crap. Modern Supros are garbage amps. Sell it before it catches on fire. That sounds hyperbolic. It sounds like I'm being an amp snob. I'm not. Earlier in the video, I was like, hey, just get a Boss Katana. Just get a used Princeton Reverb 65 reissue. I'm not an amp snob. I don't like it when people are taking advantage of. And I don't care whether it's a $300 amp that's really a $1,000 amp, or if it's a $1,000 amp, that should be a $10 amp, or given away if they could. And Supros are just... people just get bent over, and I hate that. Thanks, John, about the windowing people. Thanks, Daniel C. Yeah, the Devin Walters, the Swart stuff is really nice. Ambule, Brad's not going to change his vids. You're just going to be able to see and hear better. People form opinions about things based on the quality of how things look and sound. So and the most important one is sound. If it sounds like shit, people don't want to hear that. But when it sounds good and it looks good, and it doesn't have to look like it's this, done by the same cinematographer who did Apocalypse Now. It doesn't need to have the sound quality. Hans Zimmer does not need to be in the background of your videos playing away. You just need to have it so that nothing stands out as between you the viewer and what you're wanting to view and listen to. I know that Brad has good cameras and knows how to use them, and he has really good information. And if someone casually finds this channel and he looks great and he sounds great, they're going to say, "Oh, this guy's an expert. He's a pro." Whereas if the audio's off and the video's not great, and he says anything that might be counter to what they've read on a forum, they're going to say, "Oh, he's just some amateur." I'm gonna go back to the people who tell me about audiophile fuses on the forums. So it's just a way of making, when things look good and sound good, you don't have to lay it out on the table and measure as much. You're just like, you're already starting at a higher point. People will listen to you better. Now that only matters because Brad is telling you information that you need to know, and he's presenting the good information, a lot of which is counter to what you read in forums. So in order to give his information and perspective the weight it actually deserves, it needs to be viewed that way from the get-go from people who don't know already. Hopefully that makes sense. That's all meant as a high compliment to Brad. Because he's done really well with truly crappy camcorders and weird audio. Gam Jam, I promise you I will not ever put anything out at 144p. Hey, Ron Carter in Maryville, Tennessee. All right, I'm going to try to scroll down and get caught up. I know that I've gotten a couple of super chats I've not replied to. I want to get those. Always source your own parts if you can. Of course, learning how to source your parts takes as long as learning to build an amp, but it's worth it. Dill Taco says, "Do you have a bass amp recommendation around $1,000 for a gigging musician?" Well, you got to figure out, factor in the speaker and the cab separately. I would look at the 300 watt and 500 watt Aguilar little micro heads, and then a 4x10 or 2x12 or 1x15, depending on your style. That'd be great. Yeatzee Guitar, man, you deserve it. You do great work, and people need to know about it. I'm not saying, "and I shall give you this." I'm just saying, look at the work this guy's put out there. People need to know about it. If I can help, that's great. Ooh, I don't like Hughes and Kettner Boston guitarists. They're way, way too complicated with terrible support from the company. And really built fragilely, and I hate the way the grounds are done with everything just being quick connects to the chassis. Things go wrong. I don't know anyone who plays them except for endorsers who get them for free, and license stopped. Ron Carter, Hammond, Mercury, and I almost said Classic Tone. They're gone now. Habor. The trouble is, Habor is out of stock on a lot of things. There's some other ones, specific, but it's tricky. Elcor, I think, is the little blue one. I've not tried them myself, but Hammond, Mercury, and Habor are the big three. Hey, Chris's Random Guitar. Thank you very much, man. I will get some good candy in your honor. Don't waste your money on a Epiphone Valve Junior Joy Buzzer. I know that's not what you're going to hear on the forums, but it's really, really crappy. Yeah, Brad's saying the same thing. Yeah, there's a reason they're about $120. When the microphone's $100 and it costs more than the amp you stick it in front of. I've heard good things about Milkman. I've not heard anything bad about them, but I've not had one on the bench. I've had one Benson in. It was built really well, but I only had one. Tony Sink. I am an English major, and then I went into computer stuff. I was a tech guy at IBM for a long time, and then I was doing network and database and website design. And I ended up here, and I am qualified to say, "Wouldst thou like fries with that?" Boston Guitars. People don't clone Mesa because Mesa would patent the wheelbarrow if they could, and they will sue your ass Besides, why copy from the worst? Nathan, you're very, very welcome. Thank you for putting out that good information. Should I build a tube wah? No. You should build 30 tube wahs. I have no experience with a Rendell 5-watt head. Chris McKinney, send me an email. I would be glad to talk to you about that. It's tough stuff. Rafael Grashala, can you recommend a good pedal platform amplifier that doesn't weigh a ton, is loud enough to play a small club gig, of course is decently built? Yeah, I'll give you 3. AC15 C1, Fender 65 Deluxe Reverb reissue, Sir Bella. That's in ascending order of price and preference. So the Sir Bella would be my top choice for any of those. But it costs $1,800 to $2,000. You can get the Deluxe Reverb for about $800 to $1,200. And you can get the AC15 used for about $500, new about $800. Any one of those will be great. And you don't have to use pedals with them either, but you can. Let's see, I'm trying to get through. We'll scroll down too fast again. Dang it. I don't need someone to produce my show. I just need someone to operate the mouse. Reliability, build quality. I would say the AC30C series over the DSL40. I have no experience with the Quilter Cub. People I know who use the Quilters tend to use them as backups rather than the primary app. I don't know whether that is going to hold true for everyone, but you know. Michelle says, in low voltage circuits, 9 to 18 volts, you choose for a 10 microfarad bypass cap, space and issue, recommend electrolytic or mica. For 10 microfarad, you're going to have a hard time finding anything other than electrolytic or tantalum. What I would typically do in my own designs, if I was really critical about the capacitors, I'd say, oh, well, 10 microfarad is what's on most schematics, and that's flat down to infinity. How flat do I need it to be? Like in the Telos, I would say, well, a comparable circuit might use 10 microfarad there. I'll use two 63-volt, 1 microfarad film caps in parallel with each other. So it gives me 2 microfarad. Or sometimes I could find a 2.2 microfarad 63 volt or 50 volt film cap. And then I just sometimes, all right, I'll just bump up the resistor to ground right after that. And that gives me high pass at 40 hertz. That's totally fine. And I'm never going to have to change that cap, and it's going to sound better than electrolytic. So there are ways around it. But if you really need 10 microfarad and 9 to 18 volt pedal, you want to have at least 25 volts on that. You're pretty much going to want to go with electrolytic, because the other choice in that situation is tantalum, and they catch on fire because it's Tuesday. PV Studio Pro 112, etc. Joe Blog, they're fine. The trouble is when a part is necessary, when something goes wrong, parts for those aren't always available anymore. PV's parts department is gone, and those are kind of an old topology, an old form of technology. People aren't using power transistors very much anymore. Everyone's going to Class D stuff. Yeah, Ron, strings and things is long gone. opinion of Class D bass amps, they're not all created equal. As far as I can tell, the Aguilar stuff is done really well. And from experience, I can tell you the TC stuff is done really poorly. The ones I have repaired, most of the times I have a Class D, I replace the ice module. Occasionally I've been able to say, oh, okay, well, this little, what's it called? Ferrous bead. Ferrite bead, that's the word. Sometimes the little ferrite beads that they put on there for no apparent reason short out, and I'll just jumper those. But any serious work necessary on the power board, given a good tech's hourly rate versus the $120 cost of a whole new board, you just swap the board. It costs better. Vox are going through the best period, I think, since about 1969, as far as the build quality. And yes, I mean, the current stuff is better built than the TB and TBX series that people pay way too much money for. That was a terrible board design with plastic standoffs. Yeah, Matt Fields is seconding my recommendation, the Aguilar stuff. Thanks, Seth B. No one needs to try to troll me because I'm mean. Travis, thank you very much. That's very kind of you. I don't, my default is not mean, but man, trolls, I'll kick them. I won't even get into it. I had a real stupid comment on the channel last night. People say things in there that they would never say in real life. And I just want to find them and say it again. I can't hear you. Say it again. But their mom won't let them come out and play. Thank you, Demian. Appreciate that. Thank you, Ron. I appreciate that too. Robert asked an interesting question. How does a boost pedal increase the volume on an amp when the volume on the amp is a gatekeeper? If your amp is set to the point where the amp still has clean headroom, say a deluxe reverb with the volume on 3, and you increase the level with a boost pedal, the amp will get louder. For instance, if I were to go from my Strat to my 335, it's going to be louder with the 335, even with the volume set at 3. If I have the deluxe set at 7, the volume at 7, and I hit it with a boost pedal, the amp's going to start to saturate, which means the amp's going to start to overdrive, which means that you may not have an appreciable level increase because the amp is compressing. Same way if you plug into a Strat or a Les Paul into a cranked Marshall, you're not going to get louder with the Les Paul. You're just going to get thicker because it's more saturated. So if the amp is set so that there's still clean headroom, the amp can still reproduce a larger input waveform with a larger output waveform, a boost pedal gives you a clean boost. The issue is when you're running a boost into an already cranked amp, instead of giving you an output level increase, you're just going to make it thicker and more saturated, and you can change the harmonic response. So I don't want to pay for seeing people's nasty feet, so I can look at my own for free. Class D, there are good ones and there are bad ones. Most of the Class D amps on the market are bad because they're chosen for a really, really low price point, and the 1,000 watts for $100. It's almost like it's a free lunch. And what do people say about that? But scroll too fast again. Damn it. All right. Yes, mesas do suck, my God. Devin Walters, your question about non-master volume amps at any price point, that's too big a question. And it almost, at a certain point, it gets subjective. I mean, you can't say that a Jimino is better or worse than a real high watt. They're great examples of different things. So I'm not going to go too far into that. I would have to have a price point. Say, you know, if you got $2,000 to spend is very different than if you have $4,000 to spend or $800 to spend. I'm going to try to wrap this up. I want to get through. Oh yeah, see my match. Hugh Janus, see my videos about matchless. They were fantastic in comparison to what Fender and Marshall, etc., were making in the late 80s, but they're not as good as people think, and they run way too hot, and they like to burn themselves up. They can sound good in the process of doing that, but I'm not a huge fan. But see my videos on them for larger, more information on them. Let's see. Jack Bruce has got a little crate that's still working. That's great. Unlike the other Jack Bruce. Sorry. As in penance, I will make myself listen to Press Rat and Warthog after this. The Swart STR Tweed. Be easy to foot switch the high-low gain pot. The issue is you don't want to run that audio signal out of the amp very far. So you'd probably want to put a transistor circuit in there and have the foot switch gate that. So you need to have a little bit of power for that transistor. It could be done. It could probably be done off the heater supply without introducing any hum. But you'd have to have a pretty clever... For the average really good tech, it's no big deal. Trouble is, if you don't have a really good tech, the thing could get butchered. I would contact Swart and ask if they might have something like that. It'd be easy to do, but you just don't want to run that signal out of the amp at that point, because it's a grid. Scroll down too far. I think I'm back where I was. Yeah. And I have the mouse set to the slowest scroll. It's just sometimes it just likes to jump. Yeah, I don't have time to do the amp forums anymore, Seth. And besides it, what's the point of being on the amp forum and reading someone telling Bruce Egnator that he doesn't know what he's talking about? You want to reach through the screen and choke them. Let's see. My mouse is evil. I've not run into multi-layer 10 microfarads in suitable voltage, but 10 microfarad? Most of the MLCCs I use are much smaller in value than that, but I've not specifically looked for 10 microfarad. If they got them and it's a good company, you know, if you've got a Murata and it doesn't cost $8, go for it. Sorry, that's to Michelle DeStefano. Hey, Costas K. An FX loop send. Why would an FX loop send cause a device to clip? Well, your FX loop at that point in the MAZ 18 is at -10, not -30, so that you're running it at non-pro line level rather than instrument level, and your devices, your HX Stomp, for instance, is expecting instrument level, which is -30 nominally. Now, HX Stomp probably has an input level adjustment where you can calibrate it. But that's a complex subject. But basically, if you have an effects loop at pro level, it's going to run at -10 dB or +4 if it's balanced. And you would be running that into what's typically called studio grade effects, which can run at that. I'm pretty sure the HX Stomp can, but most guitar pedals cannot. They want instrument level, which is nominally -30 dB, unbalanced. So if you have too hot a signal going into that, it'll clip them. But if you turn the signal going down to them, you then need to have makeup gain on the other end of things. So it can get tricky. Some amps handle that with the AC30 Custom Classic has a -30, -10 setting, I believe, where you can go down to instrument level or back up, and it handles automatically the send and return stuff. Or you can get a Mesa and just guess at it and just find which one makes the least amount of noise. None of them are quiet, but some of them be worse than others. Wow, you have one of the Baldwin Willie Nelson amps. That's cool, Seth. Weekly Saturday chats, I can't promise. I want to do at least 2 a month, unless I get really busy, which I did for a while. MLCCs can be microphonic. They're not always. Thank you, very Devin Walters. That's very nice of you. I want to get set up so that if someone has a question, I click on it, whether it's a super chat or regular one, it'll pop up on the screen here. Actually, there. Still learning how this shit works. But I can't get it to work in OBS. MLCC sounds great for audio, Scott. You just got to know where to use it. I use them all the time in apps. Okay, we're reaching the end now. All right, so we've been going almost 3 hours. So let's wind it down in the next 5 minutes. And I hope that I've gotten everyone's major questions. Josh Roberts, yeah, the Fender emblem started being applied, I think, in 65 on the Deluxe. At some point in late 64, early 65. So non-logo Deluxes are a thing. After this, I'm going to find links to the 4 channels I spotlighted in this and put them in the description. I urge everyone to go back and watch them all. I mean, you don't have to watch them all, but check out 1 or 2 videos from each of them. I know that 3 of them are, thank you, Brad, because I'll be copying and pasting that. Thank you. 3 of them are very guitar centric. So that's going to really apply to everyone. One of them, Time Preservation Society. There's guitar content on there. He's a guitarist. He's a singer. He's a great guy. We need to support him. But his focus is more towards the microphone and recording into things. But so many people have home studios, or try to these days, that there's increasingly a need for guitarists to know at least some of how that works. And I think he's a great resource. He's not the only resource you need, but he's one of the funniest. And he can tell you exactly how long something is, because he has very special devices. All right, and Brad's got the links up here. I'm going to put them in the description. I'm going to read them out again, and then I'm going to sign off. So we have Paul Stafford Cook, wonderful guy, real modest, way too modest. Thank you very much, Kieran. I'll have to answer your question now because you threw off my game plan because you asked a super chat. But, you know, Paul is just exploring his instrument, exploring the fretboard and how music works, and he takes us along in a great, inviting way. Yeatzee Guitar is exploring gear and tonal differences and how much does this matter, how much does that matter, and he's asking questions that we all have, and you know, we all have this kind of question, and he goes through and he tries to find the answer, and he's nice enough to share it with us. And I first discovered him with this insane PAF comparisons where he bought or somehow acquired about $4,000 worth of PAFs and stuck them all in Les Pauls, the same Les Paul, or stuck them all in the same 335, and then played the same parts pretty precisely through the same amps with the same recording levels. Tons of work. Puisheen does phenomenal general guitar setup. He specializes in offset guitars, but a lot of the information on there applies to anything with strings and wire that we like to bang on. And he's really funny, and he's really nice, and knows his shit. The world is full of look at me, aren't I awesome? So when guys are just like, you know, really good sense of humor, not inflated about themselves, and they're not being YouTube personalities, I like that. And then there's the Time Preservation Society, who's not I don't think he's really a YouTube personality, but he plays one on YouTube. And he's a lot of interesting people. and I really enjoy his approach. And again, the production quality is insane, and I look forward to learning things from him because he is an expert in things I am not. So I have not. Kieran says, greetings from Ireland. Greetings, Kieran. Ever consider putting together kits for your AC30 mods? No. I don't want to do the support on that. I don't want to have to deal with emails and phone calls with people blowing up their amps and asking me what they did wrong. And if that's mean of me, I'm sorry, but I just can't hold all those hands. Speaking of which, I've got other stuff to do. I'm sure you all have other things to do. I know Brad needs to get some actual work done. Brad needs to get some actual coffee, probably. He doesn't have a coffee fairy this early in the morning. So I will see you all of you again soon. And Nathan, thank you for joining us here. I'm pretty sure that Yeatzee took off to go have a child with his wife, his first child. So everyone welcome a new Yeatzee to the world. And I will catch you all soon.